We've got Rod Mar. Welcome, Rod.
How's it going?
And we've got Jennifer Pottheiser, very close to me in New York, in New Jersey. So we share the same East Coast bond. And I really want to dig into the essence of what you guys do as a sports photographer. I want to bust the myth that it's always all fun. I'm sure there's a little bit of fun that comes along with the work aspect of all this. You don't just get there today. You know, you got to work at this, and you got to build credentials, and you've got to create a respect within the environment. I always talk about this in rock and roll. You got to respect the stage. Rod, you and I talk about protecting the team all the time.
Right.
I really want to dig into the essence of what it's like to be prepared to shoot any game, let alone the Super Bowl or U.S. tennis finals, or working with some of these celebrities and these athletes that may seem like a big game and it's so much fun, you're right next to them, but it's a lot of work and there's a lot of respect going back and forth, right? We'll talk about tools and things like that. What were you going to say?
No, 100%. We focus really, I think Jen and I were talking about this before we got on stage. We do think it's fun. I work really hard at maintaining the illusion that it's fun. But yeah, it is hard work, right? It's like if you worked in the best restaurant in the world, you're like, oh, you get access to the best food all the time, right? You're like, yeah, but I'm cooking it every day, right? And that can get a little bit repetitive, right? And so the battle, and I won't speak for Jen, I know the battle for me is, how do I stay fresh? How do I stay ready? How am I going to be my kind of utmost creative self every day when it's the same type of event every day?
And the beauty of action is the action will be different, but you're right, the environment pretty much stays the same.
Right.
Jen, how do you feel? Yeah.
I think, again, I'm not going to speak for Rod. We are all so self-motivated. I think you have to be in this industry. And I know I want to do better than I did the time before. So that is always my challenge, to see how I can come at something from a different angle or a different look, or how can I present someone in an actual different light. And as we have all been in this industry for a long time, I'm trying to treasure those moments. We document history on a regular basis, and even if not in the exact moment after I've finished a big day or a big shoot, a big historical occasion, I will try, after camera bag is packed away, just to say, wow, that was pretty cool. There's a lot of eyes looking at the content that we've created, and that piece never gets old.
We're going to talk a little more about how you stay motivated a little bit later on. But, you know, to me, I guess what I would do is I always take these moments, let's say photographing a rock show or a sports event, maybe the last time I ever have access to that. And I want to talk about the professionalism of access. But before we get into any of that, Rod, for the audience here and those tuning in the live stream, where did this all start for you as a little wee photographer, and as you've grown in your career? How do you become a Seattle Seahawks photographer?
I don't think you become an NFL team photographer. And I've had that question a lot this week, right? How do I get to do what you do? And we were just talking to someone off stage, and they want to do this kind of thing. And I said, no one I know at the highest levels of at least our profession set out to become a team photographer. Everybody wanted to just improve what we're doing every day. I was consumed by the process, right? I'm old enough to have started in film, right? The magic of seeing the print in the developer tray, and it comes to life like in a movie. And then it's like, I want to do that, and I want to make that better the next day. I grew up doing sports my whole life, right? And when you play sports, improvement doesn't come by just playing in a big game. It comes every day shooting baskets in your driveway, or throwing passes, or kicking soccer balls. It's the everyday repetition that makes you better. Making you better now is going to attract more eyes on your work, and it's going to give you legitimacy. And Jen, you can probably share now what we were talking about, where you're shooting pro level or you're shooting youth level, and what we were talking about just before we walked on.
Yeah, reiterating what Rod has shared is you could never craft this story. No matter how hard you tried, these exact moments that we've had, the things that we've been able to witness, we set out to take pictures, and the path that might be known, but the little offshoots from that path, there is no way I could ever know that I was going to be able to shoot Jay Tatum as the MVP of the All-Star game, or that all of these perfectly things that I had worked so hard to do would align in the way that they have. So I think being in this industry, you just have to be open to making the most of these opportunities. And the only way, I laugh when I quote Peloton, but the only way to get stronger is to get stronger. You just have to do the work. And the only way to take better pictures is to keep taking pictures and surround yourself with good people who can help you get in that mode. But there are no shortcuts. You just got to do it.
Would you agree, and I'll start with you, Rod, that there's good days and bad days? That you're not always going to make that picture that you walk away with that's perfect, but when you least expect it, there's action that comes in front of you, or a moment. You know, we talk about, in your program yesterday, you discussed humanity and bringing the human side out in sports. Talk about the good times and the not so good times.
Well, I think it goes back to the process, right? If you look at the photos that we're showing here up on the screen, we couldn't plan for those moments, right? At least the action ones. The portrait ones we're planning, but these action moments, that's just being ready. The display at the plate that you see behind me, that's just being ready. That could have been a youth baseball game, a college baseball game, or it could have been a minor league game, but it happened to be a major league baseball game, right? It doesn't matter, the athletes are there. And so you're just always prepared. And yeah, sometimes you're gonna miss it, but if we're not missing it, and if we're not learning from our mistakes, then we're not growing, right? If I was making every picture every time, I think I would think to myself at some point, you're not pushing yourself. You need to get a different lens, change lenses, change angles, change how you're seeing. If it's getting too repetitive with a 400 millimeter lens, what does it look like with a 50, right? So that's kind of my process. And yeah, we miss, and we say you win some, you learn some. Not you win some, you lose some. You win some, you learn some.
He's always dropping these nuggets of wisdom. I love it. I love it.
You would say that's a part of your organization and the Seahawks, is a positivity to what you guys do and how you represent the team.
Yeah, I think what it is, as I've been taught and I've learned over the years, is I'm not going to dwell on a loss, right? That doesn't help me be better tomorrow. But what it does is if I can turn that around and be like, okay, you missed that shot. Why? Now break it down. Can't wait for next Sunday to have another crack at it.
And to stay motivated is key, because I was talking to you, Jen, yesterday about, you know, I got lazy a couple of years ago, US Open, didn't show up, you know, I have a job that I go to, but that was your job every day.
Yeah.
But I always want to stay sharp with the gear, so I want to work with it. The only way I can talk to you guys legitimately is if I do what you do. So I try to stay in that mix a lot, and I said, well, I miss Serena Williams and her final game at the US Open. And you didn't make it sound ho-hum, but you mentioned the history before. And how do you handle that? Every day it's the same kind of thing. Tennis doesn't really change, the game doesn't change, but the moments do.
I think in anything that we do, we have been given this gift of being around some of the best people in the world, and I always just try and show up with my A game. And I know for me, I can't think about the historical significance of something or the fact that I might be shooting a world-class athlete or a world-class entertainer. I know that I need to have my A game regardless, because you never know what is going to happen in that environment. You have to have anything you might possibly need physically on you for that moment. You have done so many reps on smaller scales that you just combine all of that and use it to move forward and do what you can in the moment. In the moment, you don't have time to actually think about what's happening. Because if you did, you would miss it.
The thing you just said about the top level athletes, right? That really, thinking back on that, that makes so much sense. We're surrounded by the best athletes in the world, and they got to be the best athletes in the world because of their preparation, because of their dedication to their craft. And I think that rubs off, right? Like, I'm not gonna get lazy. I'm watching these guys, grind every day in the weight room and running hills and doing sprints and doing the basics every day. That's how they got there. That rubs off on you as a photographer. You're like, oh wait, I can't be lazy.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't honor the craft of what every single person's doing here, whether it be a player or a coach or a nutritionist or an athletic trainer, right? That excellence breeds excellence. And that's where I think we're really lucky. I'm really lucky in my position. I'm in that environment every day, and it just drives you to be better.
I've always seen that there's like a parallel in the growth of your talent as the parallel of the growth of the talent of the athletes that you may be photographing. So we talk about credentials. Number one question I get is, how do you get into these events? Where do I start? And I know you guys can both speak to this because you started somewhere. Think back to that first credential where you were allowed the gift of access, and I call it a gift because you better respect the stage. You better respect the field. You better respect all the people around it. Talk about, anybody wants to know, how do I start? How do I get into this? Because I think that's pretty critical.
Yeah, I say to people all the time, and we were talking about this off stage, if you want to be shooting tennis, just find some tennis to shoot. If you want to be shooting football, this is an amazing nugget of wisdom from Rod, make the big time where you are. If you make a good picture, anyone that is looking at your content will know that it's a good picture. They will know your attention to detail. They will know how much you care. And I know I have a unique perspective in that I work with a lot of teams, and I put together a lot of teams. If I can tell that someone really has put in the reps and they want to be there, I will give them an opportunity, but I've done this enough to know that I'm going to give a rookie an opportunity to make pictures in a rookie situation. They're gonna shoot outer courts during qualies week at the U.S. Open. Let's see how you do there. Make your mistakes. If you make some mistakes, it's not the end of the world. And then as you get your comfort up to these historic moments, then you'll be ready for the historic moments. I'm not going to put someone in a situation for failure. So make the big time where you are, and people will take notice.
That
Share
is a
your
Rodism.
work. Yeah, and it's brilliant.
I think one of the things that I try and remind people is photography is more popular than it has ever been at any time. And we think about that and say, oh, well, the advent of video, like video's incredible and video is growing, but stills aren't going anywhere either. So whether you want to be a still photographer or a videographer, there are more outlets now, right? And you guys have those outlets in your pockets right now, right? So everyone wants to consume this. If everyone wants to consume this, that means everyone also wants to provide it. So when we're talking about credentials and how do I get access, you can shoot school games and you can shoot youth leagues. There are so many opportunities to practice, and athletes and coaches and families and parents who want those images. And so there's an outlet, right? And so that's where you start. And then you create this body of work, your portfolio. And your portfolio only contains your best images, right? I don't want to show people my bad ones. I don't care if I only have 6 good ones. That's what I'm showing you. And then you create that excitement, right? And now you get that first client. And then you just build on that, and you see where that takes you. And you're always improving. But going back to your original question, yes, the hunger is there. The audience is there. We just have to go fill it.
And I want to tap into something you just said, because it is a huge business as a very talented photographer to work in youth sports, because people buy images.
Right.
People want that photograph that looks like Tom Brady of their child stepping back or moving back to pass, or
Right.
their tennis player hitting a ball over the net. So there's a great opportunity, I think, in business to make that money there,
Yeah.
which is going to help fulfill your career. You buy more gear, you pay your bills.
Right.
There's a lot of that, I think, because you'd say, I mean, you get locked into a gig like the U.S. Open, you got a lot to shoot, but you're in that same place in that same moment, right?
But
I mean,
I tell people all the time, embed with the freshman soccer team at your local high school. There's a million colleges that now do media days. That was never a thing. Go refine your craft there, work on your craft there, make all the mistakes you want there, and figure out the direction you want to go and the work that you want to show where it's not under so much pressure. And then when you're ready, come to me, come to Rod and say, hey, can I come work for you? Can I apprentice with you? And that's how you do it.
Here's an example of that real quick, right? So I was working for the football team in Seattle, and then Seattle got a Major League Soccer team. And I'd never shot a lot of soccer, right? But I wanted to practice, so I went to school games, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of do this with a long lens. Now I want to learn how to do a goal remote. I don't want my first goal remote, right? It's a wide angle camera, low, and I'm going to trigger that remote. I don't want to do that the first time at a professional soccer game where there's rules and where you can put your remotes, right? I don't want to make sure it works. So I take it to my kids' games, and I'm setting up goal remotes at like an under 10 soccer game, right? That's how you start. Same with basketball remotes. Any of those things where we're trying something new. Like, I'm not trying it for the first time
Exactly.
at an NFL stadium, right? I'm working on that so I can figure out all the bugs, right? And sure, the first time I think I did a soccer remote, I think that, was focused on the net, right? I didn't know. And then I focused on the goal line. I'm like, well, the action doesn't happen on the goal line. It happens probably at about the 6, right? So that process of learning and making those mistakes, but I'm doing that in the relative privacy of my local stadium.
When there's no money
or the
on
field,
the line.
right? Yeah, and I'm not going to injure a $1 million pro athlete because a 6-year-old's going to kick it anyway, and it's going to just fall over, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I always say that too, a sideline of football games. I never want to be around the bench like you have to be. I don't want to step on somebody's foot and all of a sudden they can't play because the photographer just stepped on their foot. I know it's a little extreme, but those are the realities, and that's part of the whole parallel of the stage growing with you. You go to a high school, you shoot, you have a crappy background. Yet as you move up into a college, you get a cleaner background. We always talk about backgrounds. Yet if you go to the pro ranks, now you got that background you want that's further away from your subjects. You get that nice soft background that blends in. And I would think that just always will elevate the level of.
I want to clarify one thing. There's always a good background. There is always, it doesn't matter if you're in an elementary school, there's always a good background. And I will say further, at pro games.
You have to find it.
Absolutely.
You have to find
But
it,
that's
and then
part-
you have to make it.
Right, but that's also part of the skill, right? That's like learning how to autofocus and learning how your shutter speeds and all that work is identifying backgrounds. And I will also add this while we're here on this stage, there are bad backgrounds at pro games and pro events, right? There's
You just
an
have to
ad.
avoid them.
You just have to avoid them.
Yeah. You bring up remote photography, and the one thing I've learned about remote, especially with technologies now, we were at the Belmont Stakes, and we used what's called auto capture that came out with the Z9. When you look at autofocus technologies and the things we can do, where we used to radio trigger or hardwire trigger things, we talk about remotes and being a solo person. I was out with Ken, one of our engineers, and we had auto capture on 3 Z9s in the dirt, on different places that we mounted on the finish line, and the camera knew exactly when to focus because we set it to the parameters.
Right.
Talk about how important remote photography is in actually taking you as an individual, making you more than just one person.
I'll say, remotes aside, thank you to Nikon for just making our lives easier and making us look better, because...
Well, that was all my responsibility.
Thank you.
I created
I am
it
so
all.
appreciative. But
Shameless plugs here.
yeah, it
Shameless.
is... the gear is so good. If you know how to use it, you can do pretty much anything you want. Whether it is in-camera multiple exposures, whether it's setting up remotes. The gear has made our lives so much better. I know it's extended my career, and it. I would encourage people. There are tons of things you can do with remote cameras, but make sure you know your gear, because when you're out in these high pressure moments, in these low pressure moments, you don't at that time want to be fumbling with how to do something. You want to have done all of these steps before, and that you can do it without thinking about it.
Yeah, Rod, you brought up finding the background or making the background. You alluded to having the right lens and the right aperture to cleaning up that background. I'm going to ask you just two pretty straightforward questions. One for tennis for you, but let me start with you, Rod. You're going to the Super Bowl with with the Seahawks. Well, you went twice. I don't want to talk about the loss, about that, that famous.
I better pack. I thought we got eliminated.
Just hand it off to the beast.
Okay.
Right? All right. But you're packing for the game. What are you carrying to the game, focal length wise? What are you doing as far as bodies and lenses?
My standard kit right now is Z9 cameras and a Z400 2.8 with the built-in 1.4 extender, because that now gives me two options, right? I've got a 600, essentially, right? 540.
560.
Yeah, 560,
F4.
right? So I've got the built-in extender. That's just the click of a switch, right? And then I've got a 70 to 200. And then I've got a Z8 with a 24 to 70.
Why? Why all three?
Well, because it's like buying a lot of lottery tickets. I'm just kidding, no. I'm increasing my odds, right? The 400 millimeter lens is going to take care of everything that's far away from me. Now as they're getting towards the end zone, we're inside the 30. I want that 70 to 200, right? I studied, we talk about preparation, growing up, and in my development as a sports photographer, I studied Sports Illustrated every week. Pour one out, rest in peace, Sports Illustrated.
In peace.
Right? But what I discovered was I suck at wide angle football photography. The thing that those guys did, right? John McDonough, John Beaver, Hines, all the great Sports Illustrated photographers, they're able to make a wide angle football picture. A receiver's diving in front of them right where you are.
And like off the hip.
Right, they're
magically.
wide angle, right? The famous picture of Dwight Clark's The Catch. They're able to not only show the action, but the environment, right? We don't just want to show a guy. If I have a picture of Mike Corrado crossing the goal line and I shoot it with a very tight lens, it's his face and the ball. That could have been at the 50, it could have been at the 20. How do I know that's a touchdown? I want to be looser because the color of the grass or the turf has changed. It's painted, right? And now you have the reaction of the person behind. So I want the variety of focal lengths to be able to show the reader, show my viewer, this was a touchdown. Or look how much it was raining, or look at the beautiful sunset that's going on, say at a baseball game, right? So I have those three cameras, and then I use them in different ways to tell stories.
Yeah, it's amazing because you brought up something old school, a hip shooter. Remember the hip shooter, that wide angle that you pull up from the side?
I'm not
and
as old as you.
hyperfocal. So you'd set the hyperfocal so you know that X focus to X focus. Now the autofocus will bring you back to being able to do something simple as pulling it up.
You know what? I have a quick question for you, Rod, because as you're talking about this, as silly as this is, photographers don't necessarily sit around and talk shop all that often, but this is a good opportunity to.
We're just going to turn this into a private conversation. Me and Jen sharing tips.
So I know I am very much a creature of habit. Will you have same lens on same side of your body so that you can just grab without the
That's such a great question. Yes.
To look down?
Yes, the wide angle is around my neck. And
okay.
Thank you to Nikon and the engineers for a Z8, because the Z9 around my neck, right? I used to be about 5'10", right? And then my neck just kept going like that. So the Z8 with a 24 to 70, or what I really now prefer is the 24 to 120 f4.
Oh, so
just gives me a little bit more,
yeah.
right? And the high ISO capabilities of the Nikon the Z mirrorless cameras is incredible. So I'll have that around my neck. I'll have the 70 to 200 around my shoulder, right?
Right
and then
shoulder.
Right shoulder.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to go like this.
Yeah.
A lot of that has to do with muscle memory, no?
That is
Just remembering
huge.
where to go at what time.
Well, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but
I didn't
whenever
want to expose that to everybody.
when I grab it off my left, there's no shutter button on the left hand. So yes, it has to be on the right, right? I'm going to grab it here, and now I'm ready to shoot. And by the way, this around my neck lens is pre-focused. Okay, I want to make it even easier on the autofocus. So I've pre-zoomed it to about 50 millimeters. I'll between plays. The great thing about football, right, and tennis, there's a little break, like between every piece of action. So during the huddle, every single play, I'll take it up, I'll like kind of compose. What if DK Metcalf, if he comes and he jumps higher than our other receiver, Tyler Lockett, because he's taller. I want to make sure if this comes here that I'm ready and I can see what I want to see, and I'll kind of pre-focus it so that when I grab it, and I'm sure the camera's good enough to focus from wherever I had set it, but right, we're eliminating every single variable. I'm eliminating all the variables.
And these are the things, I love hearing you talk about that because I thought I was the only weird one that did things like that. But regardless of the scenario where we're shooting, you don't have the time to look down and say, oh, what body do I have on my right? What lens is there? It is all of those things that we have learned from the repetition to know that this body is right here, that if I need to adjust my shutter, I'm going like this. If I'm going to my ISO, thank you, Nikon, for moving ISO to a one push. All of those
you can thank
things.
Me.
Yes, again, this is the Mike Corrado thank you hour. All of those things we have learned from just doing them and knowing what we want on our right hip, knowing what we need to have in our waist pack so that we have made every single mistake at least once so we don't let ourselves make those mistakes again. And
that's how you get to the U.S. Open. Be their photographer. You only make the mistake once.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Coco makes it to the finals. You have to go out and shoot. What are you bringing out to the court in the way of focal lengths?
You know what? Rod described his kit. Pretty much same on my kit. I'm strictly with Z9s, and I will also have. I have a lot of corporate responsibilities, and I'll do portraits. So into that mix, I have the 105. I referenced it yesterday. When I was showing my portraits, I love the 58 Noct lens, is absolutely incredible. I'll have flashes on my bodies. If I don't actually have them on my bodies during a sporting event, I'll certainly have them in my pouch because I don't know when I'm gonna get pulled into something where I'm gonna need that just to make a slightly more refined image, and you're just covered with what you might need. Pack of gum usually
Spare
in
batteries,
there. Spare
water.
batteries. Well, I don't bother with the water.
It goes beyond the camera gear.
Yes.
I would think you want essentials to survive.
Yes.
If you can't go back in, and you need a drink and you need to hydrate. But I want to spend, the last portion is talking about individual pictures that I've selected from your slideshow. And I want you to really give the truth about what it took to make these pictures. So if we can go to the click-through, guys, set up the click-through. I found it very interesting, and you just mentioned it, so it's a perfect scenario to move forward and segue. You don't just shoot the action. You have to shoot things for the cover of magazines that may be portraits. You need to know lighting. This isn't about shutter speeds and apertures. It's a little bit about everything in photography. It makes you a generalist in a certain way, targeting a certain type of sport. But, I love the connection with the athletes you mentioned before. I don't know all the basketball players. I know you do NBA, you do NHL, you do US Open. You have these moments, you don't have a lot of time. You tell me, what's the scenario here? How quickly do you have to shoot? What's your preparation? What's your go-to?
I mentioned this yesterday. I think it's always about knowing the story. This is Jay Tatum. He wore it. NBA All-Star Game is a common time for players.
Plays for the Boston Celtics,
He
Tatum?
plays for the Celtics.
I know a little bit about basketball. Rod knows this, I don't know.
You guess.
It is common at the All-Star Game for players to launch their new shoes, and Jay was wearing their new shoes. And obviously I didn't know Jay was going to win the MVP for the All-Star game, but chances are a player of note is going to win. They're likely going to wear a new sneaker. So how do you have their sneaker as impactful as the rest of them? I don't know Jay's height, but most of the guys in the NBA are close to 7 feet. So in a full body image, you're losing something between their eyes and their sneakers. So how can we compress that? And then you factor in you're in a limited space. You likely have low ceilings. You are just being dealt whatever hand you're dealt. Usually you'll get about 5 or 6 frames if you're lucky. If you can really work it, maybe 10. So Jay walks over to set. Congratulations, Jay. You're going to sit right here. You're going to do this. And I have tested this already. I know exactly what exposures I need to be at to your point, every possible scenario I have imagined. And it's just a little bit of refinement once he's in there. You know, adjust your feet a little bit, move the trophy. It is over before you've had a chance to even be aware of what has happened.
So preparation, obviously, having everything set. He comes in, try a couple of things, because you've got probably about a minute to 2 minutes with him.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and there's no, I limit the chit chat. There's no time for autographs. This isn't about me. He knows that I have a job to do. He has a job to do.
That's so
Let's
key
get it
too.
done.
It's not playland, right? You know, you can tell your friends, hey, I'm going to the Super Bowl next week. Nobody's thinking about the 600-pound cases we're moving around or what it is we're doing there. No, I'm not sitting at the 50-yard line with a cigar and a beer. We're working. Rod, talk about the action shot here. I love the way you capture these moments, and you do it consistently. And that, to me, is the difference between somebody just getting into this or not. You know the game, right? You know what's potentially going to happen. Talk about this photo and what
right. And here's the thing. Everyone looking at this photo, right? This is just a simple handoff right through the middle. And I always, as a team photographer, I want our players facing me. So if we're on defense, I'm behind the opposition's offense, right? In case we intercept a pass or there's a sack and they're going to come towards me. So offense is facing me. So this is just a simple handoff right through the middle, probably only designed to gain 3 to 5 yards. And I can't really see anything because if you think about this, I'm looking at the backs of the defense and they're in black jerseys. So I've got to look through the safety, the linebackers, then the defensive linemen, and then our offensive linemen, right? I can see the quarterback. I see it's a handoff. And all you're thinking at this point is, okay, that's a handoff. It's probably not going to be much. The repetition in shooting thousands and thousands of plays is you keep shooting because then he breaks the tackle. Okay, and now I still have him. And I'm still trying to find him between all the defenders. And then he just decides to up and jump and try and hurdle a defender, which doesn't happen a lot in the middle of the field. It happens a lot outside the numbers. You guys are nodding. You know what I'm talking about, right? Outside the numbers, outside the hash marks. This is in the middle of the field. He goes up. I just keep shooting. I will say this, big thank you to Nikon's engineers for the autofocus capability, right? Because in the manual focus days, I probably don't have this shot tack sharp, right? But I keep shooting through the play, and then I get a series of 15 images of him going up and over. And then you see this one where I get his face, and I get his hand, and I get it clean with the defender. You know, and all the little details. You can see that his glove has a pattern. All those things kind of add to this picture, including now the bokeh from the long lens. Right now we've cleaned it up. So that's kind of how that one went.
And it's funny you say that, and now I want everybody to think back. There was a point in time where the fastest camera he had, an F3, would run at 6 frames per second with a motor drive. And you brought his name up before, and I can't not say one of the best manual focus track shooters that were out there. I just spoke with him. He's going to shoot his 58th Super Bowl. The only living photographer to do that is John Beaver. So that big change in technology.
Real quick, I know you're trying to move on, but like you talk about that practice, right? All those guys would practice their manual focusing on things like cars on freeways, like stand on an overpass, right? Because manual focus was a trained muscle memory. You're focusing on cars coming, and then you're switching and going cars away from you, right? Like, it's all that stuff. That's what made those guys great.
And
that's why they shoot all those super.
Autofocus.
It does, yeah,
Autofocus.
all of those things, those little itty bitty muscle memory things.
So Rod, a quick question. When do you chimp?
There's plenty of time. I mean, there's 35 seconds between plays. So if I need to look at something, but other than that, I don't.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't really.
I love hearing Rod talk about chimping.
Chimming is looking at the back of your screen to see if you got it or not. But also, I don't rely on that because it's a JPEG on a very tiny screen. And the engineers have done such a good job with these Nikon mirrorless cameras of creating a bright, sharp screen. I will tell you this, the dirty little secret is stuff's gonna look sharper on your screen than sometimes it is when you get it to a laptop or, God forbid, on a wall this big. So I don't spend a lot of time looking at it.
Leave it to me to be the Nikon guy and the technician to remind you that when you hit that center button, you can zoom into 100%.
Absolutely.
And your knowledge will tell you that you've got sharp eyes, you got the right part of the frame sharp.
You know, I don't spend a lot of time
Chimping.
Yeah, because I have to think about time score situation. Where's the ball? What could happen next? How much time? What's the score? All of those things I'm always kind of computing.
The funny thing about chimping, though, if you do remember the legacy of all this, it wasn't necessarily a great thing. It was a disparaging thing about photographers that got so caught up in playback, and that's where the chimping came from. And all of a sudden, there was a great action shot that they just missed.
Yep.
Back in my day. But
well,
I want to talk about Coco now. I want to move on to Coco. And we got to shoot Coco at the same day, right? But you got the great shot. But I shot a little bit overhead. But talk about this shot and why you put this in your
one actually, Coco is so emotive. It is incredible. She is a remarkable human being and excited to have the opportunity to shoot her as often as we do. This is actually from the Billie Jean King Cup. And I included this one, what has been such a huge help for me is being able to be mobile. And as light as the Nikon gear is, if I'm running between courts, if I'm running back of house to get something done, there are times when I'll just take my 70 to 200 and do in-camera crop to get a money action shot. And that's what this one is. At that event, I am going, I am so mobile that to have long glass, I just can't maneuver everything to be able to go from shooting long glass to flash on camera with a meet and greet. So again, talking about the technology is just, that is something that has been huge for me. I love being able to switch in camera and know that I have a fantastic shot and get a clean backdrop and an incredible expression.
Here's another tip, right? You can see it, you look at her eyes, and they're just slightly popped open, right? So for shooting baseball, sometimes it's a hitch in the swing. With a football player about to catch a pass, the eyes just get a little bit wider.
Yeah.
And Jen has developed this innate sense because she can't see when the ball's coming because pro tennis players have their rackets back so early. You can't really count on that, right? So she's looking at the body language and right, that little piece of body language and the eyes just popping, and you know at that point she's going to whip that forehand through.
But I would say this too, without joking, that technologies like IAF take us away from what we used to run into with issues of depth of field, where if we focus on a ball in the front, you're not on the eyes of the football player running at you. And it really does, and 20 frames per second, you got more moments than you could ever imagine. Now, this goes back a little bit earlier in your career. Talk about this shot.
This is actually a remote shot. So this is a camera, 70 to 200, focused on the home plate area. And this is where, when I talked about time score situation, right? So we have a runner on second. I know that if there's a runner on first or second and a ball gets hit to the outfield, we could have a play at the plate, right? So actually I'm outside third base and I'm firing a remote camera that is kind of near the third base batter's box. It's focused on the plate, right? So the ball gets hit to the outfield, it's in the gap, and I'm thinking, okay, this could be a play at the plate. Right, and so I'm kind of watching, and I'm shooting with my 400, right? And he rounds third, and I'm able to now get two distinct views of this play with two different cameras by pressing one button, because I'm firing my remote from my camera. I was a pocket wizard at that time, right? And then this frame looks better than the frame I got from the outside with the longer lens. So going back then, remote camera, right? Took the time to set it up, to pre-focus, to know where I wanted to be, and then knowing time, score, situation, computing that, and being able to go, okay, now we're gonna have a play at the plate.
Yeah, there's such easy technologies like the WR system now. You could be within the vicinity, and simply by triggering one camera, it's going to trigger another camera or several cameras.
I wish I would have had that at that time. I was pretty lucky.
Nowadays, you've got all that. Now, I put this picture in because I want people to understand, group shots are never fun, I could imagine. So talk about what goes into putting everybody in this and making this shot happen.
Yeah, I love them. The more pieces to the puzzle.
You do, that'll drive me nuts.
Yeah, I like the exercise of preparing as much as possible beforehand. I talked this through a little bit yesterday. Before anyone shows up, I have it sketched out on paper where everyone is sitting, where everyone is standing, what people are going to be wearing. I'm not great with names, so I have during the shoot, this particular one, I had a huge whiteboard with every kid's name, every player's name, because when you have 8 minutes to get this shot and you have to have that young woman on the left move her body just a little bit, you need to be able to call that person by name if you don't want your shoot to get derailed. So all of it is just so much pre-production.
This is incredible. How many lights? I gotta know, how many lights?
I think 7.
Incredible.
But again, all of that planned out in advance in my chicken scratch of knowing what I think the picture should look like, and then you get there and you start to build out the set, and it's never what you think it's going to look like, and hopefully it's better than you think it's going to look. And
how many frames did you shoot here?
Of that whole group, probably 20.
So 20 frames at 1/200th of a second, right? So it's way less than 1 second of time in camera, right? Camera actually capturing image.
I had
to
never thought
hours
about
and hours and hours
I love
and
that.
waking up at 2 in the morning and going, oh, I got to write that down, right? Like, that's the process.
That's all part of the preparation.
That's the process.
Yeah, and I guess Rod and I had chatted about this. He's a wake up at 2 in the morning and write it down. I can't sleep, so I write everything down before I go to sleep. I know if I've done my homework, I'm in good shape, and whatever happens day of, you never know, but you just kind of learn to roll with it.
I absolutely love this picture.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
Thank you.
This is full of emotion, it's full of a moment, it's full of intensity, it's a little bit of everything. Obviously showing your versatility of it's not just the action on the field, you got to learn to light, you got to learn to pose, you got to learn to do this type of stuff. Talk about this as we close out.
Yeah, it's a portrait of DK Metcalf, and his biceps are almost as big as mine, and so I really wanted to kind of
your waist.
really want to show, right, a dramatic portrait. But not every football or sports portrait has to be high action, high intensity, because as I talked about in my presentation yesterday about the humanness, right? They're people, right? Not only are they emotive on the field, but they're reflective off of the field. I wanted to capture that. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be clean, but I wanted it also to be powerful.
And it's all of those things.
All of those.
We are right on time, guys. Thank you for all this. You've mentioned it before. If you haven't seen their programs individually, go back to the library at Nikon Live at NikonUSA.com, and you'll be able to see these programs. And they talk more in depth about the work they do. And you talk about the human side. You talk about your versatility, and all of this is just so. I could do this for hours because it's so inspirational. But thank you, Rod. Thank you, Jen. Thank you,
Mike.
guys here.
Thanks,
thank
Jen.
you guys tuning in. We got one more program here at Imaging USA to close out. We've got Hilmar Smith coming up. We'll have a break here in the studio where Chloe's going to come up again and do some live shooting. But we'll close out the day with Hilmar Smith. She's an amazing studio photographer out of Orlando, does these insanely cool, inspirational, fun portraits, and we'll be back in just a few. So thank you guys.